Hello there, it's Neil, and today I'm at North Stone, Recumbent Stone Circle. And this is probably not one that's visited too often because it's relatively remote. It's very near Alford, but it's in the countryside. Down in that valley, I'm parked on just off the road of a single track B road. It's about a kilometre from the car up to here, and it's a gentle rise, or it gets a little bit steeper coming up this hill here as you come up. What makes it a little bit more difficult is this field is half gorse. I've had to follow the cattle path through the gorse, up the fence line and across the stone. So again, it's not only is it uphill, but it's not particularly easy to navigate through all the gorse to get here. However, saying that, it's an interesting stone circle for two reasons. One is the stones are relatively small. It's like a small hobbit type circle. And the other reason is there's 17 stones. So there's quite a lot. The brief history behind this, as far as we can tell from Great Grounds of Stone documentation, is the landowner, Miss Farquharson, commissioned a restoration of the stone circle back in 1897, and I think then this whole area was a tree plantation, or was heavily forested, and so not only was the circle restored, but the surrounding trees were felled. The recumbent was all the stones were re-erected. The central part of the circle was levelled, and during that levelling they found 7 grave sites with outlines of skeletons and some pottery and some other bits and bobs that's detailed in Great Grounds of Stone, which is probably lost to history or somebody's cupboard or collection or in a skip by now. But it's interesting that what they did was they levelled the inner, what we would call the inner core or the cairn site, and then what they did is they built what's gone completely now is a roundel or a short wall right round the circle. Now, what I was kind of thinking when I was looking at the Great Grounds of Stone documentation was that reminds me of Easter Quartes. Easter Quartes has a roundel, and its roundel was created back in 1860, 1870. So I wonder if the inspiration for the roundel here, 30 years after that, 20 years, 30 years after that, was Easter Quartes. Now, Easter Quartes that's Tapo North. So Easter Quartes is the exact opposite side of that hill. And it would be quite common it would certainly be known about. And especially if you're doing a restoration, you'd probably want to do a bit of maybe research, and it'd certainly be a circle that would be well known and visited. And maybe perhaps that was the inspiration behind putting a roundel round North Stone, and that roundel is now gone completely. There's not much evidence on the way up here of stone dikes, but there would undoubtedly have been some, so maybe the roundel was essentially robbed for stone dikes. So let's have a look around the stones then. There's 17 of them to have a quick look around. This circle, well, this particular patch of land, the last time I was here had cattle in it. And I think it's been used for cattle grazing for decades, maybe even longer than that. But since 1897, since the restoration was done, archaeologists have come up to visit the site and noticed stones, 1 or 2 stones had been toppled and fallen over, and I suspect that's because they're relatively short. The cattle maybe been using them for rubbing stones, and they've been pushed over at one point or another. So since the restoration, when the circle was rebuilt with the roundel, has been visited maybe every sort of maybe 20 or 30 years, and stones are found to have fallen. There is essentially only 3 stones out of the 17 still standing, and we'll walk around them now. But the other thing that's really nice about the circle is the red kind of pinky stone. Beautiful, really nice. And if it's, you know, apart from the number of stones and the relative kind of uniqueness of this circle, it's lovely to come up and see this kind of pink stone if you're going to venture up. So number 1 stone, lying down, relatively short. I think if it was upright, it would probably be up to maybe kind of waist height in its socket. Kind of relatively pointy at the top, maybe. Flat faced. Recumbent, 1.5 meters long, maybe a meter high. Clearly been, I mean, I think we've seen lots of restored circles where they've used plinths or a kind of bed of stones to lie to set the recumbent on, and that has certainly been the case here. So, however, the stone has fallen back into the circle, but it is, if I'm standing in the circle and looking across it, I am looking south, and there is I think it's mill of something, that hill that's over there. It could be aligned with that originally, but it's a slab of a stone. I mean, if it was up on its end, it would be maybe a flanker for any other circle, or certainly a circle stone for sure. But it is a relatively small one. There's a fair crack right round it here, but it's lovely pink stone again. There's like a various grey granite stones, which I suspect was maybe the plinth that the recumbent sat on. So number 3 stone, the east flanker, relatively short. So we're talking about just coming up to the top of my leg here. A bit of a kind of triangle shaped stone, fairly flat faced on the outer side of the circle, a bit rough on the inside. Again, not much in the way of markings round about or anything like that. There's no evidence or kind of recording of any cut marks or anything like that on the stones. But again, it's probably quite difficult to kind of even hazard a guess on, are the stones in the correct places? Had they just fallen out of their sockets and been re-erected, or had they been essentially all over the field and then put back in kind of, you know, maybe the restoration team kind of guessed where they were going to be. It's quite a difficult thing to say, because the restoration documents suggest that not only had they built a roundel around the circle to kind of mark where it is, maybe the great crowns of stone suggest that it might have been to make it quite obvious for visitors to come and see. But not only that, but they had excavated the centre section to level it out, and that's when they found the graves. They also found what they kind of thought was maybe an inner circle, but what great crowns of stone again explained that could be the curbstones embedded in the ground for the cairn, as being maybe mistaken for a kind of inner circle. But that's all gone. That has gone completely now. So stone 4 has kind of fallen outside the circle, fallen out towards the outside of the circle. Again, a bit of a kind of slab of a stone. As far as we can see, it's kind of buried into the ground a little bit, and that has been the kind of the problem with this circle. And when archaeologists have come to visit it, is that there's overgrown or such has been a real issue. Trying to even find stones. Sometimes archaeologists have been kind of thinking it's more like maybe kind of 15, 16 stones instead of 17 stones. This is stone 5. I mean, it's a bit of a kind of just a small stub of a stone, really. So stone 5, stone 6. Interestingly enough, there's various stones just outside the circle, which again could be curbstones or could be just kind of field stones. This is unlikely to have been a field that has been ploughed much. It's probably been just used for grazing because of the steepness of it. So this is stone. This is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 6. This is one of the bigger stones. This is right up to my rib cage kind of size, and it's definitely a more chunkier stone. This is a classic kind of circle stone, isn't it? That we see from other ones. But again, it's that beautiful pink. I'm no geologist, but it's lovely. It's just lovely, and it has got a bit of a kind of there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 sides to it. The outer side being a little bit kind of beveled, but it's lovely. And again, you can never tell with when the documentation talks about a tree plantation being round about the circle, especially up here. I mean, we're on top of a hill basically with, I don't know if you can hear with the audio, there's a really strong wind on even a nice day like today. You know, you're going to get trees falling over, you're going to get trees felled during just like tree operations in the past, and undoubtedly these stones would have been hit and smacked by fallen trees, or trees growing right next to them and falling over and leaving them out their socket would be another cause of them being, you know, found lying on the ground. So that's stone 6. Stone 7 is a nice thin stone, but it's a bit of kind of triangle shaped, a bit of a kind of edge to it here, beveled outside surface, a bit higgledy-piggledy, not quite a kind of well-shaped stone as we would maybe kind of see, but again, I've kind of modified my whole outlook on that, and you know, discussions with Douglas, we kind of talked about the ice, you know, stones essentially being dumped by ice sheets would have riddled this whole countryside. What we're used to seeing is a manicured countryside, you know, beautifully flat, ploughed fields with no stones because they've all been removed over decades and decades of ploughing and field removal and field management. But before all that, there'd have been just, you know, large stones like this lying all over the place. So rather than, I mean, I still hold both in my mind that you could go, the communities could have went off and quarried and then carried or sledged these stones to these particular sites, or they've essentially just moved them from a few meters away and just, you know, made basically like moving the furniture, made a circle with them, and maybe shaped them. Maybe communities, you know, one community after another looking after the circle or adopting it, or coming once a community has abandoned it, another community might adopt it, and they may then reshape the stones. But it's kind of difficult to kind of make any assumptions with what we've got presented today with them. So stone, what are we on? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On stone 8, change of colour of stone, more kind of grey granite. And again, it's a lump of a stone, it's a boulder of a stone, this one, fallen into the circle a little bit. You can clearly see where it's been in its socket. And you can only assume that all of these stones have essentially been re-erected. It's a relatively oval-shaped circle. I think it's maybe kind of goes from 21 metres to 18 metres in diameter at its shallowest and its widest. So it's 8, 9 is on its side. Getting grey as well. 10 is back to being this kind of pink stone on its side. So we're kind of, I mean, the rest of the stones now are pretty much all fallen all the way round to the recumbent. But I think what Great Crowns of Stone have done is they've taken what the stones would have been and graded them in height, and it looks like the classic, you know, if you're trying to define the characteristics of a recumbent stone circle, is there's stones, they're in a circle, there's a recumbent lying on its side that faces south. That's pretty much defines a recumbent stone circle. But the other kind of little things that are relatively common, not always, but relatively common, is that the stones grade in height from the flankers at the recumbent all the way to the back of the stones, the back of the circle being the smallest, the shortest ones. This is 11, a bit of a snub of a stone, a kind of boulder of a stone, but again that lovely pink. 12, back to being kind of grey. It looks like there's a kind of shape in this one though. There is. Maybe it's maybe just been damaged. Round to 13. And you can only imagine these stones being upright, a good kind of quarter of them being the inside their socket, the rest of them being standing up. A nice slim slab of a stone. 14. Getting quite a lot larger, this one. Again, if you were to look across, right directly across this other side of the circle, where the two standing stones are, it kind of reflects that kind of size. It's more of a slab, a chunky slab of a stone with, you know, flat front, maybe facing out, and flat, I would guess, flat facing inwards. 15. A kind of pointy, maybe kind of square, certainly triangular, but probably a bit squarish stone, pointy stone. I'm guessing this has fallen into the circle and its socket was probably just around about where we're standing here. 16, a kind of flat stone. Quite an unusual one, that one. It's like really quite a squashed slab. Relatively, no, it's not too thin. It's maybe kind of hand span kind of thin. Again, the kind of pinky grey, pinky red stone. That stone's not counted as far as great crowns of stones are concerned, but this is stone 17. Before we get back to the recumbent, again a grey stone. So quite a lot of pink, red stone in the circle. Clearly a restoration done about 120, 130 years ago. Due to the field use, the cattle use, the cattle in the field rather, it's probably been unintentional that the stones have over the years fallen and fallen and fallen. So we know it's been restored, we know the centre section's been levelled and dug out, we know they found 7 graves within the circle. We know that they built a roundel which has now disappeared. We knew the stones were all standing at the end of the restoration, and I think over, although it's clearly not the practice now, but I think the practice had been that when archaeologists visited the site, the stones were re-erected or requested to be re-erected, and that's not the case now. So over the last 100 years, stones have been found to have fallen, re-erected, and now it's the policy of Historic Environment Scotland essentially not to touch them. If they're fallen, they're fallen. They're not going to be re-erected, or there's not going to be any restoration or anything like that done. In fact, I think it's maybe even, I was going to say frowned upon, I think it's an offence to even clean a stone, you know, to clean the moss off a stone. So it really is, the kind of practice or the policy is to kind of be very hands off. The monuments are the monuments, and they are what they are. So it's an interesting site, definitely one for a fair weather day, I would say. It's like I say, probably on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe the difficulty of getting up to site is more like a kind of 6 and a 7. There was one gate to climb over, but it's a kilometre to get here, and it's all uphill, and it's not the easiest terrain. That's the other thing I missed out. The terrain is quite uneven, as well as very gorse bush to kind of get through. The first time I came here, I actually walked right through a bog and got stuck, which was a laugh. But now it's all turned to kind of like gorse land down at the bottom of this hill. So yeah, it's be fair warned if you're going to come up here for a visit. But it is worth a visit for the enthusiastic circlist to come and have a look at, because it's rarely visited, it's rarely documented, and it's lovely pink stone and unusual because of its size. So I hope you've enjoyed that little walkthrough of North Stone, and I'll catch you later.